right, you're listening to KX 93.5, Laguna's Only FM. I'm Scott Hayes. This is OC Caravan. I'm in the room this morning, of course, with my co-host, Mr. Jim Bastian. That was Woodstock, by the way, from the CSNY album, Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young. Of course, great song. I'm having a moment here, but I think it was written by Joni Mitchell.
It was.
Yeah. So that voice, by the way, and I'm so delighted to have this guest in our studio. I tried to reach out to Henry for months, and I never got a response back, And several weeks ago, by accident, we were at Zinc downtown.
Right.
And I'm standing right next to him, and I'm going, here's my moment. And he was very receptive. So in the studio this morning, we have the legendary rock and roll photographer Henry Diltz, who has shot every imaginable rock icon that you can, and more than 100 album covers. Do I have that correct?
Yeah, a couple hundred.
Couple hundred, wow. I'm going to give you just a nutshell, sort of a thumbnail sketch of Henry's background. He was the official photographer at Woodstock and the Monterey Music Festival.
Yep, Monterey Pop Festival.
Monterey Pop Festival. He shot the album covers for the first Crosby, Stills, Nash album. Stephen Stills, that one with the blue sweater in the snow.
Right.
That was yours. I love that shot. Jim Morrison and the Doors, James Taylor, Sweet Baby James cover album, Jackson Brown's first album, not titled Saturate Before Using, but certainly it's on the title. Dan Fogelberg, Souvenirs, the Eagles, both the first album and the Desperado.
Yep.
He's also had intimate photography sessions with the likes of Neil Young, Mick Jagger, Paul McCartney, Frank Zappa, Janis Joplin, Tom Waits, Eric Clapton, America, Springsteen, Michael Jackson, Garth Brooks, The Police, Ray Charles, The Who, Jimi Hendrix, Kurt Cobain. How am I doing?
Yeah, I guess.
It's pretty impressive.
Yeah.
And I'm not done, Henry.
Okay.
He's also, his photographs were featured last year at the Grammy Museum in Los Angeles, and he's the co-founder of the Morrison Hotel, which specializes in fine art, rock and roll photography.
Right, Morrison Hotel Gallery. Yeah.
Gallery, excuse me. So,
yeah.
Henry, I guess I'm so delighted to have you here. There's so much I want to get to. My first question is, I'm going to go way back to when you were the, quote, official photographer of Woodstock. I want to know how you became the official photographer for Woodstock and what it was like to have sort of the best seat in the house.
Yeah, well, this whole trip has been sort of an accident.
Yeah? Is that true?
Yeah. I mean, before I was a photographer, I was a folk singer, folk musician. And I played in a group called the Modern Folk Quartet. And in the early 60s, we spent about 5 years doing college concerts and folk clubs and TV shows back and forth across the country.
Yeah.
And,
let me play a little soundtrack, April. Let's play a little bit of this. This is called...
Reach out, tell somebody.
Is that you?
Yes, that's the Modern Folk Quartet. Years later. I mean, I guess Mozart is a kind of folk music.
I guess.
But, we did quite a few albums of folk music. And then we went to Japan in the late 80s, early 90s, and they at one point asked us if we would do a Mozart album. So this is a cappella Mozart song.
Yeah.
Well, during those folk days, there was a lighting director named Chip Monk. His name was Edward Berenson Monk. And his nickname was Chip.
Yeah.
So everyone called him Chip Monk. And he was a lighting guy on I think we were in Daytona Beach, Florida, doing a big festival of some kind. And we got to know him real well. And so years later, he was working with Michael Lang on Woodstock. And he called me one day. I was in my kitchen up in Laurel Canyon, and the phone rings. Chip says, Henry, we're having a great big festival music concert out here in New York. You ought to be out here for it. And I said, well, Chip, I'd love to, but I don't know those people. How am I going to do that?
Yeah.
He said, well, I'll talk to the producer. And the next day, Michael Lang called. He said, Chip says we need you out here, so I'm sending you a ticket and $500.
Wow. Wow. So you were there for the full concert?
Yeah, I was there for 2 weeks before the concert, photographing the stage construction and the whole, building of the whole property and the camping grounds and the hog farm, tent city and all of that stuff. Just kind of documenting.
You were there shooting pictures of, say, Richie Havens.
Oh yeah.
Santana, The Who, Crosby, Stills, Nash.
Yeah.
Jimi Hendrix.
Yes.
All of those great artists who were at that event.
All of those people. And some of them I knew. I mean, in the folk days, we had been on the road with Richie Havens, doing a folk tour. And then Crosby, Stills, Nash, this was right after they had recorded their first album, which I did the album cover for.
Which we're going to talk about.
So they were friends of mine. So I did have, friends around there. And,
I've never spoken to anybody who's been to Woodstock. So
is that right?
That's
Wow.
right. And
Yeah.
I want to know what that experience was
There's
like.
About 400,000 or 500,000 people.
I know. What was that experience like? And can you give me one sort of moment that best stands out for you?
Well, the first 2 weeks it was like at summer camp. Because, there were all these hippie carpenters with their shirts off sawing and hammering and building this great big wooden deck in the middle of a green alfalfa field. So it was like an aircraft carrier, and the alfalfa was the sea, waving in the wind. And, sunny days, and the hippie girls would bring lunch for everybody and from the office. And, it was just great. And then one day there was a little group of people sitting up on the hillside. And I remember my first thought was, well, what the heck are they doing up there? Oh, yeah, wait a minute. This is going to be a music concert, You kind of lost track of that because that wasn't happening at all.
Yeah.
And then the next day there were a few thousand, and the next day 400,000.
Right.
And then I was trapped there. I couldn't get a mile down the road to my boarding house. I had a rented station wagon parked behind the stage, which I then lived in for 3 days and slept in. Because you couldn't get down the road. There were so many cars and so many people, you couldn't drive down the road.
Yeah.
What was the rain like? And was there
the
preparation for it, or did that just sort of
the
happen?
rain came that one, I think, Saturday afternoon. And in fact, at every Woodstock, it rains one day,
Right.
Because I also shot Woodstock 94 and Woodstock 99.
Oh, I didn't know that.
And then you have the mud people, the people that slide in the mud and get covered with mud. And that's all a part of it.
Back to the original Woodstock, of all the artists you shot that weekend, is there one in particular of moment that stands out for you?
Yeah, the one moment, of course, that stands out is Monday morning when Jimi Hendrix went on.
Yeah.
Because, he was supposed to close the show Sunday night, but it was so backed up that he didn't go on until just dawn on Monday morning. And, boy, these guys walked out on stage with these colorful bandanas. And, we had been up virtually for 3 days. I mean, I'd get a couple hours sleep, but so we were a little dingy, a little shell-shocked, and these guys came out, whoa, and they started playing. And when he played the Star-Spangled Banner, that was the moment.
Yeah.
Because that song echoing out and bouncing off the hillside and coming back, just his solo guitar playing the Star-Spangled Banner, complete with all the sound effects, the bombs and machine guns and planes diving. It was startling. It was mesmerizing, hypnotizing. And there was a feeling, because, we were all anti-Vietnam War and anti-government and all of that stuff. We wanted the new hippie paradigm, the new world, And so there was a moment there where you thought, well, wait a minute, was he playing that song? That's their song. And then, no, wait a minute, that's our song too, And so it was a real patriotic moment, yeah.
No, that's amazing.
This past weekend, I watched the documentary Under the Covers, A Magical Journey, Rock and Roll in L.A. in the 60s and the 70s.
Right.
I want to kind of talk briefly about some of the album covers you shot. One of the first ones I wanted to talk about was the very first Crosby, Stills, Nash album cover. The three of them sitting on the couch in front of that, I don't know what it was, a building of some sort.
Yeah.
That was yours?
Yeah.
What was that experience like, working with that particular group
well,
at that particular album?
Yeah, I knew those guys individually and collectively. I mean, I knew Stephen Stills in, I think, 63 or 4 when our folk group played New York City. And he was playing in a little club, and he would come down to hear us in his breaks, and we'd go see him in our breaks. And I knew Graham from the Hollies, and I knew David Crosby before the Byrds, and all through the Byrds. And so these three guys had this super group, and so they were all very good friends of mine. And at that point, I was working with a graphic artist named Gary Burden, who grew up in Laguna Beach, as a matter of fact. So they were doing this album. They had no publicity photos, so we went out one afternoon just to take some photos because they had no pictures, you know, and they were halfway through with the album. And we went around West Hollywood, stopping here and there, jumping out of the car, taking photos. And Graham had seen this old funky house right off of Santa Monica Boulevard. And so we went by there, and they jumped on that couch, and we took pictures. It wasn't planned to be an album cover. We were just taking pictures.
How does one decide, out of all the pictures you shot maybe that day, to pick that one?
Well, for album covers, it was my partner, Gary Burden, who was we became a team. He
Gotcha.
was a graphic artist. So I would take, 500, 1,000 pictures. He would look through them all and pick the one.
Wow.
And then he would lay it out, and he was so perfect, unerring, in picking the right one. But, that particular picture, we took the picture, and on the couch, they are, from left to right, Nash, Stills, and Crosby.
Right.
And they hadn't named themselves yet. So during the time we developed the film, had a slideshow and said, boy, that's a nice shot. We could use that for an album cover. But look, in the last couple of days, we've decided to call ourselves Crosby, Stills, Nash, so we're backwards. And so there was some thought of flipping the picture over, but then Stephen would be holding the guitar backwards, so that would never work. So I said, let's just go back. It'll take 5 minutes. We'll jump on the couch, click, 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 we're done. So we got in the car and drove back, and the house was gone. So
That's funny.
One of my favorite bands of all time is The Doors, and one of my
Doors,
favorite
yeah.
albums is Morrison Hotel. So you
Yeah.
did the album cover for that.
Well,
Tell us
the
about
Doors
that.
called Gary and I, said, we've got this new album. We want you to do the cover. So we went and met them at their office, and we said, okay, do you have a title? They said, no, we don't have a title yet. And, well, do you have some kind of an idea what you want, on the cover? And, no, we don't have, That's why we called you guys, and we're scratching our heads going, well, okay, let's see. And then Ray Manzarek just randomly spoke up. He said, the other day my wife Dorothy and I were driving through downtown L.A. and we saw this old funky hotel. It said Morrison Hotel. And we just said, wow, that sounds,
Right.
We probably said groovy, And so we went right down and saw the hotel and went back a week later to take the picture. And then the story goes, the guy behind the desk wouldn't let us photograph in the lobby. It was a transient hotel, rooms $2.50, and like winos would sleep it off in there. And so this guy wasn't going to let us shoot. So I said, okay, come on outside, you guys. And I thought, well, I'll have them stand in front of that window. They can't stop us because we're on the sidewalk. And as we walked outside and they were about to stand there, I saw a light go on in the lobby. And I looked through the window, and it was the elevator light. And I looked at the desk. The guy had gotten in the elevator.
Uh-oh.
So I said, run in there. They ran in, got behind the window. We took one roll of film and got out of there. That was the album cover.
That's amazing.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
You shot 2 Eagles album covers. You shot the very first album cover.
In the desert.
And then in the desert, and then Desperado. And I want to go back to the first one in the desert.
Right.
Because I had heard stories you guys took peyote out there. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to know what it's like. I don't know anybody who's taken peyote with the Eagles and shot their photo. I want to know what that experience was like for you.
Yeah.
I want to know what it was like while you were on peyote.
Well, we were hippies, and, we used substances to,
Yeah.
to enlighten ourselves, and make things a little more interesting. Of course, people were smoking God's herb,
Sure.
And mushrooms weren't really around so much. Peyote buttons are kind of like mushrooms. Mm-hmm. So we were experimenting with psychedelics, and Gary and I had hit on an idea when we would do an album cover for a group. We'd try to get them out of town on an adventure somewhere, because then we would have all day or all night, and they wouldn't be, they wouldn't have their girlfriends or their managers or their. Of course, there were no cell phones then.
Right.
So we'd get them out of town. We'd go to Big Sur. We'd go, some Indian reservation or the desert or whatever it was. And so for this, the Eagles loved the desert and the whole mystique of the desert, and we knew a Chumash Indian medicine man named Semu, and so we'd learned all about peyote buttons and whatnot. And we had these; they're like little round chips of wood, and you've got to scrape the fuzz out of the center because that's strychnine, and you scrape that out, and then you pop them in your cheeks and just suck on them, and they really taste bitter. But then after about a half an hour, they taste pretty good. So we went out to the desert, and we left the Troubadour Club at 2 a.m.
Wow.
And then we got there, it's a 3-hour drive to Joshua Tree. We got there about 5 a.m. It was still dark. And we climbed the mountain in the dark and got up to the top. And we spent the whole day on top of the mountain and into the next night. And we had a teapot bubbling on the fire with peyote buttons in it and made peyote tea. Really, we laughed a lot. We laughed the whole time. We had a great time just laughing. And Gary, my partner Gary, would always say, just shoot everything.
Right.
Film's the cheapest part, So I would. I mean, that was my nature anyway, just to document. I was kind of a rabid photographer at that point. You know?
And then the one shot that you settled on for the album cover, do you remember that moment?
Well, Gary was kind of an innovator. What he wanted to do with that particular cover, because if you remember it, it's really a blue sky with a little eagle up on the top and a cactus silhouette on the bottom. That cover actually was going to open up to be 4 covers square. So it would be the size of 4 album covers, and it would be a poster. And at the top was the sky, and then the bottom was the cactus silhouette, and then the guys were sitting around the campfire in the bottom of that. And then the inner sleeve, instead of being paper, was cardboard with a beautiful cactus flower on it. But David Geffen thought that would be confusing, so he told them just glue it shut. But so when you opened that up, a double fold, you saw the eagles upside down sitting around a campfire. And so nobody ever got the real effect of that. You were supposed to open that up and put it on the wall.
That's
David
too bad.
Geffen.
There you go.
David Geffen.
You know, he saved, a penny or two an album, which amounted to millions.
Hi, I'm David Wilhelm, and this is Jimmy's Famous American Tavern. Jimmy's has been called a casual comeback for me. I think that's because most of the restaurants that I developed in the past were white tablecloth, upper-end restaurants. Jimmy's was designed as a place for friends and families to gather and enjoy regional American comfort food in a casual setting. Jimmy's Famous American Tavern. Simple and traditional.
I played this club in El Centro one night and I ended up sleeping on the linoleum floor. At some point I got up and started writing a song. I wrote a bunch of stuff until I finally got a good line. And the next day I found myself at a street fair in Old Town and I saw this beautiful girl wearing these turquoise earrings. I knew right then I had to put her in the song.
You're listening to KX 93.5 Laguna's Only FM. This is OC Caravan, Scott Hayes, Jim Bastian with legendary photographer Henry Diltz. Henry, we were talking about all your amazing photography with album covers. In this day and age where everything's downloaded, all music is bought online, there's no longer that vinyl album experience that kids used to have, me growing up. What's your observation in terms of album art, album photography today compared to when you were doing all of your work?
Yeah, well, that was an art form that's kind of disappeared in a way, although groups now are putting out vinyl, 12-inch albums.
It seems to have a resurgence now.
Yeah, it is, and people are collecting that old, album cover art, used album covers and stuff. It's a disappeared art form. It was so wonderful, it was such a great palette to create on. I mean, it was a nice 12-inch square, to fill.
Now you got to look at one of these and get it on your little screen.
Stuff,
It's still there. There's still obviously photography, but
I mean, we're all so connected up nowadays, that you lose one thing but you gain another. I mean, I think many more people get to hear the music, but you don't have those wonderful album covers anymore.
Right.
But it'll evolve, it'll change,
Yeah. I think it's coming back. I think people are starting to realize that there's a little bit more to the music experience than simply downloading it and listening it on your phone. So.
Yeah.
I want to talk about, you've got a series of books out there. I mean, you're still doing photography, yes,
right.
But it's these books that you've had come out over the years. One is called Henry Diltz Unpainted Faces.
Yeah.
Came out in 2011. Canyon of Dream, The Magic and the Music of Laurel Canyon.
Right.
Came out in 2012. From the Doors to Cobain. 4 decades of music captured by the legendary photographer. And California Dreamin', which is the one you've got in front of you, right?
Right.
Is that? Can you hold that up and let the camera see?
Yeah, sure.
And what's this album all about?
This book, California Dreaming, is published by an English publishing company called Genesis Publications. And they do limited edition coffee table books. There's only 2,000 of them made, and they're numbered and signed. And they do such a great job. I mean, I could never have a finer book than that. It's a $500 coffee table book.
It's
beautiful.
beautiful.
You have to order it from England, from Genesis Publications.
I mean, this is probably a 500, 700-page book. I don't know.
Well, I don't know, several hundred pages. But,
beautiful sort of cloth covering. Talk about the binding.
It's got Levi cover. And then the box that it comes in is a tie-dyed box, and that's John Sebastian's tie-dyes. Really? They actually scanned his jacket and made that tie-dye box to put it in. Yeah.
That's amazing.
That's really cool.
Do you have a new book? Do you have a new book coming out?
The newest one is that Unpainted Faces that you mentioned. Unpainted Faces is translated from a Japanese word that means kind of natural. There's a word in Japanese that means natural, kind of, and another translation would be unpainted faces. So it's a black and white book of just, music photos, documentary style. And so that came out. And then I'm going to do, later this year, I'm going to put out Painted Faces, which is going to be the companion one, which will be color. So we'll have the black and white and the color book together.
What would you say is one of the more iconic photos you've ever shot?
Well, one of my favorites is Sweet Baby James.
Yeah. Okay, why?
That picture, first of all, I love James Taylor's music and his playing, as a folk singer myself. And I love that song. However, when I took the picture, I had never heard the song because, the album comes out after you take the picture. But we went to my friend's house, so it was called The Farm, and they had these little sheds and barns, and I knew that would be a good place to photograph him. And all they wanted was publicity photos, which meant black and white, because newspapers couldn't print color. So I was shooting black and white, and he leaned on this great big pole. He's a big, tall guy, and it was about a 6-foot pole, and he leaned on the top of it. I took a few black and whites, and I said, wait a minute, James, don't move. And I reached down and got my color camera. I was thinking I need to get a color shot to show in slideshows to my friends, because that's what I like to do, was to have slideshows. And you can't project a black and white in those days.
Yeah.
So I said, wait a minute, just let me take a color shot just for myself. And then the manager saw the color shot, and then they used it for the album cover. So it was, a lot of these album covers are not, none of them are really sort of planned and set up, They all are kind of accidental.
Wow.
Yeah. Hey, so I want to talk a little bit about the Morrison Hotel Gallery. You have a Morrison Hotel Gallery in L.A.?
Yes,
and you have one in
New York.
New York.
Mm-hmm.
And can you just sort of brief people on the concept behind it and why they might be interested in visiting?
Yeah. After 40, 45 years of shooting photos, people used to say, oh, you must have quite an archive. And I hated that word. It sounded too professional. All my life, people say, "Oh, you're a photographer. Are you a professional?" And I would say, "No, I just love to do it."
Yeah.
And sure enough, I did have what they call an archive. A big, cardboard boxes full of negatives and pictures. And we kind of organized it all. With a couple partners, we started touring it across the country. And we'd go to a different city once a month on a weekend and have a show and sell prints. And finally, we ended up in New York, and we got a little place in Soho, a little storefront that was up for lease. And we had a weekend show, and it went really well. And we said, well, we're going to take all these down now, but this place is empty. It's up for lease. So we made a deal with the landlord that, we'll give you X amount of, cash once a week, and as soon as you lease it, we'll leave. And so we did that, and we were 1 year in one place, and then we moved to another and another. And finally, we found a permanent place right in Soho on Prince Street. That was about 12 years ago, 13 years ago. And we had no name for this gallery. It just said the photography of Henry Diltz. And one day, we had the Doors picture in the window that said Morrison Hotel on it. And I was across the street with my partner, and I said, Peter, look at that window. We have nothing on our window. And look at that picture in the window, how nice that looks on the window in the photograph. Why don't we put that on our window? Just sort of attention-getting thing. Yeah. And he said, that's a good idea. I'll call a painter tomorrow. And so we got accidentally called the Morrison Hotel Gallery. But it says rock and roll without saying,
right.
Rock and roll.
So it's a gallery where people can come in and visit and look at all these great photographs you've shot over the years?
Yeah, well, in the beginning, 13 years ago, it was all my photos.
Okay.
And you just walk in, and every photo, 100 photos were all mine. And, they were for sale in different sizes, different prices, framed, unframed, whatever. And
prints, originals, that sort of thing? How's that work?
They were original, printed from the negative or the slide. Right. And then my partner said, after a year or so, a couple of years, he said, we should have someone else in here with you. Who would you, of all the music photographers, who would you like to have in here with you? And I said, Jim Marshall. Jim Marshall was a San Francisco guy who was kind of my guru, of music photography. So he joined us. We had a big show, and that was great. Then we got Neil Preston from L.A., who'd been on the road with Led Zeppelin. Then we got Bob Gruen from New York, who had shot John Lennon and Yoko. And One by one, we added photographers. Now we represent 120
Wow.
photographers.
Amazing.
So if you walk into our gallery, you'll see photos from everyone. I'm lucky if I have 2 or 3 on the wall. But we have a website, MorrisonHotelGallery.com. And even in the gallery, people look on the website and they can order.
Beautiful.
So you order, and then we ship the picture to you. So then we opened one in L.A. a few years ago. Right now we're at the Sunset Marquis Hotel in L.A. and the W Hotel in L.A. And, we almost opened one up here in Laguna.
Oh.
There was a great place right on Coast Highway, but we didn't move quick enough, and then it was gone, and we never did. But one day I wouldn't mind having one in Laguna.
Oh, that'd be a beautiful idea. Jim?
So is there anybody that you regret not taking a picture of at some point? Is there the one shot you didn't get, the one person that you wanted that you didn't get?
I think probably John Lennon, because I never really did shoot the Beatles, although I did go to Shea Stadium with the Lovin' Spoonful, and we ended up in their dressing room just before the show with the Lovin' Spoonful and the Beatles and I.
Oh, wow.
But
yeah.
I never really had any Beatle pictures, but after the Beatles, I did a lot of McCartney, a lot of Ringo, and a little bit of George at Bangladesh. George, but John Lennon is one guy that I never got to photograph.
Who did you most enjoy spending time with of all the musicians and artists that you've photographed over the years? Is there anyone in particular that you really enjoyed his or her company? I know there are a lot. Don't get me wrong, and I don't want you to pick one, but anybody that sort of surfaces in your brain right now?
Crosby, Stills, Nash were really good friends, so it's always fun to hang out with them. Paul McCartney, he's a Beatle,
Right.
And he's just such a great guy. I loved hanging out with him. The Eagles were particularly fun on the road. They knew how to tour really well and how to do all of that. You know. In later years, I photographed Garth Brooks a lot. I still do.
Yeah.
He's a wonderful guy to work for. Such a great guy. I always say the 3 gentlemen of the music industry that I think are really true human beings who look you right in the eye, and they're just really great people are Paul McCartney, Graham Nash, and Garth Brooks.
So with photography today and digital, have you changed with it, or do you still shoot on film?
I shoot digital now. I thought I never would. I said, I'm a film guy. I'll never shoot digital. But it's just so easy to do. It's virtually the same. I miss having a negative.
Right.
And really, now that years have passed, it's all those 60s and 70s photos people want. So I'm still dealing with the slides and the film, and, we print from negatives. I shoot digital now,
right? But
all of the famous pictures were really done, some time ago.
Speaking of digital, I've got a little $90 Samsung camera that I bought about 4 weeks ago. I've only taken one picture on it.
Oh, my God.
I'm wondering if you could just push a button for me so I can say I have an original Henry Diltz of myself.
A little pocket camera, too, a little Canon. I use this more than a big camera.
As you're taking a picture, by the way, what are you looking for in the camera's eye that sort of tells you you've got the moment?
Well, one thing is framing.
Uh-huh.
You need to, let's see.
You want to pose? You don't want posing, right?
1, 2, 3. I don't know how to set the lighting on this very well, but there it is.
All right, thank you.
Oh, that's good. Yeah. For me, it's framing.
Okay. What do you mean by that?
When they were film cameras, you had to know the technical part, how to set the f-stop and the time, or have a light meter to take a reading. That was just kind of a mechanical thing. But it's you get to pick the moment you push the button. So you're looking through there, you're looking at the person you're photographing, and you wait until they look the way you want them to look, and then you push the button, and then you got it.
Yeah.
But I think framing, which is kind of an unconscious thing for me, is move in, fill the frame. In kindergarten they teach the kids, fill the whole paper with your drawing with the crayons.
Right.
Draw right out to the edge. And it's the same with photographs. You have that little square, and you want to compose something that feels good in that square.